Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the beta webinar for Caseware Working Papers, Financial Statements, and Probe. Just in terms of house rules and how we'll be running this meeting, all attendees' microphones are muted and cameras are turned off. You are more than welcome to use the chat or question function during the session to ask any questions. If signal is lost, please exit and enter the webinar again. Use the app rather than the browser. We find that does make a difference. And a recording will be made available to you via email. On Monday morning, we'll send you an email with the link to a recording of the webinar. Okay. And with that, in terms of the agenda and how we plan on running this session today, I'm going to take you through the Caseware Working Papers and all the changes there. Then I'll be handing over to Ninka, who will take you through the financial statements. And then we've got Sandhani, who's going to take you through all the changes you can expect in Probe. Okay, so as Caseware Africa, we obviously want to provide you the best software possible. And in order to do that, we go through ultimately a beta process. So for anybody that's not familiar, a beta process specifically gives you early access to the software that's officially going to be released on the 15th of October. We will be doing a subsequent webinar with everything that's what's new again on the 10th of October. And in terms of timelines, building up to the 10th of October, today we're on Monday, on the 1st of September, we'll be sending you the email with the link that I mentioned to the video recording of this webinar. And it'll give you, that same email will give you access to all the install sets, all the release notes, and the feedback form, and the questionnaire if you want to opt in for the license management testing specifically. So you can get everything that you need on the email on Monday. Then we're going to give you a period to test from the 1st of September to the 12th of September. During the testing period, you're more than welcome. You have access to all of us. You can email us with your queries or call us or use the feedback form. But the sooner you give us feedback, the better the process will be, because it gives us a bit more time to put in all the changes that you request before the final release on the 15th of October. So the deadline of all the feedback is on the 12th of September. So that's how we intend running the beta process. So just to recap, we're working our way to the 15th of October final release. On Monday, you'll get the email and access to all the software. And we ideally would need all the feedback by the 12th of September. And specifically for the license management testing, you'll see in the email, there's an opt-in form. Once you opt in, we'll contact you to be part of the license management testing. Okay, so I'm Mohammed Asmal. I look after the working paper side of things, and I'm going to take you through all the changes that you can expect in this release. So first up, we heard you when you said that you're having a problem controlling who's using the licenses or all your Caseware Working Papers licenses. To that end, we've implemented license management. So license management is a new feature that you'll navigate to from the success community. You'll go to the My Licenses page, and underneath where you renewals, which you used to seeing, you'll see a new option called license management. Now, when you click on that option, it will actually take you to the new licenses page, where you'll be able to see who's using your Caseware Working Papers. So to that end, I think the first thing I want to show you is if you want to see who's using all your Caseware Working Paper licenses, all you've got to do is click on Download Registered Users and open up the Excel file that comes through. And just like that, you'll be able to see who's using all of your Caseware licenses. So I can immediately tell that I've got Mohammed, who's me, I've got Zamir and Skulk and Karabo, but I immediately noticed that there's Zamir is using 2 licenses. Now, that could have happened because of a number of reasons. Maybe he's got a new laptop and he hasn't given his old laptop in, or maybe his old laptop was formatted without it being the license being revoked first. And ultimately, what happens is you technically short one license. But this is a quick way for you to identify who's using extra licenses so that you can take appropriate steps. So the next appropriate steps in this case would either be to contact Zamir and say, are you actually using two licenses? Do you have two PCs? If you are, please revoke on one of the PCs the license, or if his PC has already been formatted, you can easily contact our support department, and you can say, please, can you revoke one of the licenses? And then immediately that license will be made available again. So I think there's huge benefit there to you guys. It's a problem that we've worked on and we're trying to fix, and we heard you all, and we really hope that makes a difference to your lives. Additionally, I think I just want to bring to your attention, we're also giving you a new interface to see who's using all your template licenses. So in this instance, I've purchased IFRS financial statements, IFRS for SME financial statements, and Probe compilation, Probe MMX audit, and Probe MMX review. I've purchased 10 IFRS and IFRS for SME licenses, and as you can see, I've allocated only one of those licenses. So here's the allocated column, and Skulk has been allocated one of those licenses. If I wanted one of those licenses, I just click on the tick box, and just like that, I will be allocated to the IFRS for SME. So we don't envisage everybody needing to come here and allocate people. What we envisage happening is when you install Caseware, I'm going to quickly take you to Caseware Working Papers, and I'm quickly going to revoke my license. So I think the first thing I want to show you when I did revoke that license, I'm just going to refresh the license information, and then I'm going to download my registered users again. And you'll notice now that I've revoked my license, I'm no longer in the list. That means I'm not consuming a license anymore. But the thing to take note of is that in order for this entire system to work, what we had to do was we had to change the way we register working papers slightly. So the difference that you'll see now is that over and above putting an authorization code, previously the name and email address was not mandatory. Now they are mandatory fields. So notice when I take out my name, the next button is grayed out. And the moment I put my name back, the next button becomes available. So now I'm quickly going to register my Caseware again, back and refresh the license information. And then I'll download that file again. And just like that, I am back on the list because now I'm using a license again. So that's for the Caseware Working Papers licenses. In very rare instances, some of our clients, they would have purchased a different number of licenses for Probe as compared to the financial statements. So for example, in this instance, I've purchased 10 IFRS financial statement licenses and 10 SME licenses. What that means, I've got 10 users that can use it, and at the moment, for IFRS, only 2 of the 10 are using those licenses. Like I mentioned previously, you can click this button, and then whichever user you need to be allocated to those licenses will be allocated to that license. But we felt that that was a very cumbersome process. And in most instances, everybody's number of Caseware Working Papers licenses is equal to the number of licenses that they have for financial statements and that they have for Pro. So what happens is when you do install the new working papers and you do register, go through the registration process that I've shown you now, it will automatically allocate everybody in your firm to each of the templates. And because in most cases there's a one-for-one relationship, you really wouldn't need to do any sort of reallocation here. However, any of the users that have, or for the minority of users that have a different number of working paper licenses to the number of probe licenses that they purchase, you would then have to specify which, if you've got 20 people in your firm, which of the 10 people are allowed to use probe. When we open up Caseware Working Papers, we'll then check and make sure that they are licensed to use probe. And if they're not, they'll get a message saying that they are available or there's no licenses available. And then they'd contact the firm champion, and the firm champion would assess whether they need a license or whether they can reallocate another user. So we made the process as simple as possible. We don't envisage you needing to do anything over here unless the number of probe licenses is different to the number of working paper licenses. And we did take into account a couple of things in terms of if the user is not online. What happens in that scenario is that we'll give you 5 days to access Caseware and the templates before we require you to go online and just open up a working paper file just so that we can refresh the license information here. So that's license management. We do believe that it's going to make a big difference in your lives. And I will then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the installation. So just a reminder, the installation process will be slightly different in terms of you'd be forced to put in a name and an email address when you register in Caseware Working Papers. This is just the real reason is to make the licensing management as easy as possible for the firm champions that are managing this entire system. Okay, then another interesting change is on the installation screen. When you go to the My Software page to download the software. So I'm quickly going to jump to the My Software page. For anybody that doesn't know, you get access to our software by logging on to our Success community. So that highlighted on screen is the URL for our Success community. Once you've logged in and you have the firm champion rights, you'll be able to see the My Software menu. So then the My Software menu, when you click on it, it will bring you to this page. On the My Software page, what will happen is previously anybody that needed a silent installation needed to call our support department, and our support department would then put that firm into a queue. And at the beginning of every day, they do a couple of silent installations, and there was probably a 2 or 3 day turnaround time. We've automated this process now. So for anybody that does want to install using a silent installation, all you've got to do is click, instead of clicking on the Get Installer, you click on the Get Silent Install. When you click on that button, it'll automatically identify your account, what you're licensed for, and automatically it'll download and put together into a package all the software that you require from us, and then you can hand this over to your IT team, who can then deploy it silently through group policies throughout your firm. So as you can see, the process was relatively quick, and at the moment it's already started downloading the software. So it's a real time saver. I think it's going to provide a better self-service experience. We're really moving into the world of making it available or letting you do things as fast as possible. So we really don't want you to get stuck, and that 2 day or 3 day turnaround time has become almost instantaneous. So that's a welcome change. And then the next important change I think that I want to take you through is also on the installation. So for the installation that we released last year, a new cloud installer. So the new cloud installer basically gave you access to your software in a slightly different and more streamlined way. But ultimately, the reason we did that is so that we could continuously enhance the installation process. And the problem that was identified was that in this new cloud installer, and even in the old one, you couldn't upload your own customized firm template to the installer so that you can distribute one package to your firm so that they get working papers plus the firm template. So what we've done now is I've got the new cloud installer open. I've downloaded Caseware Working Papers, IFRS and SME. And typically you'd go and you'll say, okay, I either want to install it or want to create a distributable to my firm. But before you could do one of those steps, what you can do is you can now click on the replace template button. It will then show you the templates that can be replaced or that you might have created a customized firm template for. And all you need to do is just click on the browse button and then browse to your SME firm template and upload it, or browse to your SME IFRS firm template and upload it, and click the replace button. What that will do is it'll swap out our Caseware Africa template for your customized firm template. Once that process is done, all you do is you click on distribute. It'll create a zip file that you can give to everybody in your firm. You can put it in a OneDrive folder, or you can put it somewhere on the network, and everybody can then download and install. And that one installer will give them access to Caseware Working Papers and your customized firm templates. So we really feel that that's going to streamline your distribution process. And we're really looking forward, especially with the beta, to get some feedback on that. Okay. Then a couple of more interesting changes happening specifically within the financial statements. What we've done is we've heard you when you said that the speed of the roll forwards is actually taking quite long. So the ultimate reason why the speed is taking so long is that you've got a lot of documents in your template or in the file that you create. So in a file that you create, it typically lets you do IFRS for SME set of financial statements with multiple entity types like company, trust, body corp, sole prop. And within that same file, you've got the option to do a probe compilation, probe review, probe audit, and ultimately you used to end up with a file that was quite large and had a lot of documents that you didn't need. So what we've done is we've made the process a lot simpler by introducing a new question. This community again. So when you do a file new or a file new from existing, we've changed the screen that pops up. So previously, you used to get these two options in terms of data retention. So just to remind everybody what the screen does, this screen, if you're doing a file new from existing, and if you tick this first option to retain data from the information store, it'll take all the data that's in the information store of your existing file and bring it over to your new file. The formatting from the existing file option, that takes all the formatting changes that you made in your existing file and brings it over to your new file. So for example, if you set the page title to use capital letters, and if you set the font to be a specific size and a specific type, it'll copy all of that over so you don't have to do any of that rework. And then further to that, the third option on that screen, which you always had access to, was to retain input values. Retain input values will go through all the input cells in the old file and where it'll bring it to the corresponding cell in the new file. So those options haven't changed, but they just got a new look and feel. Also, with that, you have the option to do a year-end close. So this, if you do click to perform a year-end close, this will roll forward the figures from the current year to the prior year, and in addition to doing all the data retention changes above. But further to that, we've got the new engagement optimization option. So when you click on the drop-down, you're going to be presented with these options under engagement type. You're going to get preparation. So preparation is when you're only using this file for financial statements. You're only doing financial statements. And in that instance, we'll delete in most of the probe documents, if not all. If you do select compilation, then we'll delete all the probe documents except any of the probe documents that you need for compilation. If you select review, we'll delete all the probe documents except all the documents that you need to perform a review, etc., etc. But ultimately, what happens is that you end up with fewer documents in your document manager, so it's less complicated. And what happens is you have a more streamlined file. So when it comes time to locking down a file, when it comes time to doing a roll forward, when it comes time to syncing down changes, all those processes ultimately will get the benefit because there's less documents to go through, so the speed of the file becomes a lot faster. Our initial benchmarkings, especially for our corporate users, for example, where they're only using it for preparation, we've seen roll forwards go down from about 15 minutes to 5 minutes. So we really want to make sure that everybody gets as much benefit from these optimizations as possible. We've also included probe optimization, but Santini will take you through that in a bit, where it further lets you it only brings in the work programs that you actually need when performing an audit, for example. And all these little optimizations really do add up in the end to make a big speed difference for the major processes in terms of roll forward, lockdown, and syncing. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that change. And I think the last thing that I want to share with you guys is on the firm template specifically. So when the champions are creating a firm template, often what happens is they want to copy sections from one note to another note. And we did introduce a copy existing section feature. We've just taken that feature and expanded on it to let users specify whether they want to insert before or after. So I'm going to take you through that feature now. So when you're in the financial statements, I'm quickly going to do financial statements, and you've got the firm template guide in the document manager. So the firm template guide is there. Yeah, I licensed my file. That's why everything's, or revoked my license and then relicense without closing and opening the file. That's why everything is being grayed out. But when you've got the firm template guide in your file, and for example, if you want to create property 10, what would happen is you'd come here and, oh, so let me do this first. I'm going to copy I want to copy property 9. So I'm going to go on property 9 and I'm going to go to properties and I'm going to double click on the section label. So I've double clicked and then I go to stand on property 9 because I just need a property 10. I'm going to say insert copy of existing section. Then you tell it, I want to copy property 9, which is that string. I want to put it before, and I go submit. And what happens in this process is that it makes a copy of that section and it puts it before the existing property 9, and it does all the required changes that you would typically do in design mode when copying a section, like creating the GUIDs, delinking any cell references, delinking any links to the CV database. And just like that, now I've got 2 property 9s. I can rename this one to property 10. And just like that, I've got a new section to capture my details of property. So this feature is being used widely, and the only criticism that we did have was the fact that we couldn't specify exactly where you wanted it to go. So now you have that ability. Excellent. So there's a lot of exciting changes coming. Okay. I think there's a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to quickly try to respond to some of them. Let's just have a look. So the first question from Leandri, is there a maximum amount of time that a license may be revoked and re-registered for a user? Sorry if I missed it in the presentation. So no, I didn't cover that in the presentation, but let me go through it now. There is no maximum amount of time that a user can be revoked and re-registered on a template at the moment. I think we're going to be guided by you, especially during this beta process, if we do need to go that route. I don't personally feel that we do need to go that route. However, just bear in mind that your Caseware Working Paper license only lets you re-register 30 times. Well, I say only, but 30 is quite a lot. I'm just checking for any other questions that might not be answered. Okay, so Johan, I think there's one question from you that's left unanswered. On the installation, interested to test out the silent installer beforehand, if possible, please. Will we be able to include the firm template in the silent install packager? And will we be able to include hot fixes in the future as part of these install packages? So, okay, perfect. There's two beautiful questions there. Let me start with the first one. So, will we be able to include the firm template in the silent install package? So, yes, you will be able to include the firm template in the silent install package. All you'll do is you'll go to the silent install screen and you'll download the automated silent install by clicking the Get Silent Install button, like we showed. What that will provide you with is a zip file with the Caseware Africa IFRS or SME template in it. It doesn't provide you with the customized firm template. But all you have to do is replace by a copy and paste your customized firm template with the Caseware Africa template, and that's how you'd get one silent install with your customized firm template. So even that process, we've thought about it. It's not as automated as we'd have liked yet. It is something on the backlog, but nothing precludes you from doing that today. And then will we be able to include hotfixes in the future as part of these install packages? Yes. So every time there is a hotfix, obviously there's a couple of steps that we follow. We alert you that there is a hotfix. We make the hotfixes available to support. And when we release the next round, we normally roll those hotfixes into our next release. But what that means is you've got two options. You can wait for us to roll it up into our templates and then redo and then update your firm template, or you can get the hotfix directly from support, update your firm template, and then just upload it using either to the silent install or to the normal distributable and resend it out to your organization. Okay, so Johan, thanks for that question. Okay, and then Matodzi, I think there's another question from you. It says, will we be able to install the new template and retain customization ourselves without consulting Caseware? So Matodzi, it really matters on how you customize the firm template. So what I mean by that is, if you use the steps in the firm template guide and all the settings and format HTML, which most of the people do in terms of customization. So what that means is they change maybe the justification, they change the font size, they change the page title, and they use the super insert to insert new content like tables or extra paragraph wording. In those instances, we'd most likely retain all your content. Except if we're updating that particular section. So if, for example, in this particular update from a compliance point of view, there weren't many changes. So there's no real miss. So we're not updating the majority of the sections. So say, for example, if there's 1,000 different sections in the financial statements, and we're only updating 100 in this release, 900 of those sections would be exactly as they were when you go through the update process. But the 100 sections, you probably just have to review to just double check that everything has remained the same. However, if you customize in design mode by copying and pasting sections, it becomes very, very difficult for us to retain those sections because we aren't aware what was changed and how it was changed. So in those instances, you'd have to go and double check that all your customizations are still there. especially in this release and in the next release, when there aren't a large number of customized or sections that we're updating, I do believe that most of your customizations would still be there. It does still warrant you to do a double check. I think Nika has done a test with one of our client files already, which was highly customized, and we seem to be getting good results. But as you go through this beta process, and if you want to work with us and tell us, show us some of the things that you expected to retain that didn't retain, you're more than welcome to share that with us.
Welcome back, and my name is Ninka, and I'm going to cover the financial statements changes that we will be having in beta. I do just want to remind the users, because we've got quite a few questions about the beta, which makes me think that there's quite a few new ones, which is great. I just want to remind you that part of the beta is Working Papers 2025, and then also the templates are on this 2025 template. What that means is if you have Working Papers 2024, which you should have, or before on your machine, and you then install the 2025 beta, you won't be able to open those files that you've converted because that will now be on a higher version. So just be aware of that. And what that means is if you want to test a file, please make a copy of that file. Don't use a client file to do any of your beta testing on. We always advise, because our beta templates are still in beta. There is still changes being made on them. We are still finalizing some of the content. And then obviously all the feedback that you give us made some changes as well. So the beta templates is not intended to roll out to the broader part of the business or do your engagement files on. If you have done testing, so you've done your Working Papers 2025 with the templates, then uninstall them again and install the Working Papers 2024 with the market release available to do any engagements file that you currently have to complete still. I just wanted to highlight that. I hope that is clear. Right, with that, I'm going to jump into the changes that we have for the financial statements. So what I'm going to cover today is the trademarks, the tax computation, the cash and the cash flow worksheet improvements, the PI score calc, IAS 21, XBRL update, and then some other items. So the first item that I want to cover is the trademark, and yes, I've only put that one on. This seems to be quite a contentious issue in the market currently on the different interpretations of how this is being done in the financials. Do you have the short version? Do you have the long version? Do you have it with the trademark? Do you have it in brackets? Do you have the first one in your financials shown differently? Do you see each of your report being separate reports, or do you see it as one document? So those were some of the questions and some of the feedback that we got from the market. And how we address this is we updated the information store that you'll have a drop down there, which have quite a few more options available. And we will also add a few more after this beta session. And then those options will then update everywhere in your financials. So that process is quite similar. You'll just have the more options available in the information store, but you can still go in each and every section on the drop down and change it to something else if you would want to. So what the workflow will be, how we would suggest to work, is the one that's used most often. You'll change in your information store, and that will then update throughout. And then the one that you feel is the first one that maybe should look different, you can go on the drop down and change that to the different option available. So I'm quickly going to show you how that looks in the software. Let me just get my info store. So if I say in the info store, these are the options that you'll have. You'll have, this is your basis of prep, which is IFRS, and then your entity one. And then you'll have the drop down here. Now, I already got some feedbacks of some of our clients that was at CWX to say that this registered trademark shouldn't be at the back, and also one or two other ones that they feel should be part of that. And we'll include all of that in our beta with the final release. How this will then work is if I open my financials, just going to jump quickly there. And let me quickly go where the first one is. You'll see here that I've got IFRS accounting standards there, so pulling through from the information store. But then you also have the drop down, the same drop down that you have available in your information store on each of these cells. So you'll see there's the cell, and then the next one is here. The only exception to this is the audit report. So there we have included it as in SARBS 3, because that is what we follow, is the template that we provide is for SARBS 3. How it does work in the audit report, if you change in one of those instances to something else, then all the cells is linked to each other, and it will change in all the audit report scenarios. But the rest of the or independently, that you can have the different options available. So with that being said, I would like to just, if I go back to my slide, this is currently the different options that we will make available in the template. And I'm going to run 2 polls on these. And the first one is, and you'll see in the poll, the questions or the naming are a little bit shorter because I couldn't fit all of it in. Is there any of these that you feel are non-compliant? So I'm going to show you the IFRS ones that you feel it shouldn't be there because it's against what the trademark documents and all your legal advice has been saying. And then if there's one that is missing, unfortunately the polls can't cater for that, I would ask you to just put that in the questions and I will reach out to you afterwards if you feel there's a specific one that we missed. So the IFRS and SMEs you'll see will look exactly the same. You've got where the trademarks are, and but then obviously just IFRS and SME. So with that, let me do the poll and you can say. So the question that I'm asking here is, are there any of these options that in your opinion is non-compliant? I'm going to give it like 30 seconds to quickly answer. And like I said, if you do have any other, I see Johan, you have another one. I'll have a look at that. We really want to make sure that the drop-down includes all the options that you need, that at least it's easy for you to change going forward. I see there's quite a few people still voting, so I'm just going to leave it open. Sure, you guys are just checking your financials to make sure which ones you covered. Okay, with that, I'm going to end this poll. And then I've got another question. Let's just go. And the second question is, if you said yes, that some of them are non-compliant, then please indicate. So here you can have multiple ones. Please say to me which ones are the non-compliant ones if you said yes. If you think all of them are compliant, then happy for you to keep them. Then you don't have to answer this question. So it's quite interesting, the poll that we've just done. I mean, more than 80% have said that no, there's none that's non-compliant. But if I look at the feedback, there's quite a lot of you that's, for all of them, feels it's non-compliant. So we'll definitely reach out to some of you just to get your feedback. But at the end, if we can't get a conclusive answer from the market of what you're using, we will be including all the options and you can just use the ones that are relevant to your entity. Okay, I'm going to end this poll. Thank you so much for that. It really helps us a lot. And then the next one, if you look at IFRS standards and SME standard, one of the big things are, but you'll see in the install file is not correct for all the drop-downs yet, is the standards for IFRS, and it's only one SME standard. So with that, also then comes that's part of the IFRS for SME accounting standard and for all the ones. So my question here is, do you feel or do you agree that the for IFRS specific, for IFRS for SMEs should be included in the trademark, or don't you? So it's a yes/no question. And you can just say, do you feel that the should be included as the IFRS for SME standard, because it's one, and then for IFRS, it is just IFRS accounting standards because it is plural. So here we've got quite an interesting 50-50, if a VES should be included or not. I'm just going to give it like 30 seconds more. Okay, thank you everybody. Like I say, that really helps us just to understand what you're currently doing in your files. Right, then the next change that we made was the tax computation. So we had quite an opportunity here to re-look at it due to the deprecation of our tax products, which really gave us a clean slate on how we want to change it. So the first change that we made is we made it part of the financials. So it's still at the banner where you saw it before, but instead of going to an external document, it's now part of the financials. And why that is really beneficial is you have all the functionality that is in the financials, so especially like your formatting, your columns, all of those. We have also changed your permanent and temporary differences to now be input fields because we won't be maintaining the tax codes going forward as we don't have the tax products anymore. But it also gives you the opportunity to insert rows there and to add what you would want. You have a current and the prior year, but you can toggle on and off if you would want to. We know sometimes you just want to include, as it's not audited and part of the financials, you just want to include the current year. So you do have the option to toggle it on and off for the whole tax comp. And then we also included multiple signature areas. This is a feature that a few of our clients have asked for before, so we have also used the opportunity to include that in there. So I'm also just going to quickly jump back to the IFRS and then I can just show you how it looks. So like I said, it's still at the bottom. Let me just use my Public. So it's still part where your banner normally were, but you now have your, at the bottom, you have your whole tax comp, your input field for all your permanent differences. You have the button here at the top, which you can switch on and off, references on and off if you would want to, and your capital gains, and then you still have your assessed loss calc, small business, recon, and we included the current and prior for the whole section because I know in the past that we just did it for the top and not for the balance sheet. And then if there is balances that can pull through, it will pull through here from your so for example here your current tax balance, and then also your undefined difference will still calculate for you back to your financials, and then you have your signature area. So that's how the tax comp will work. I just want to see if there's questions specifically to this because I see. Okay, so the tax, I just have one question here on the tax comp. Linking still available. So you do have your reference column available, so you can link it there if you would want to. And then the rest of the functionality is exactly how you have in your financial statements. Okay. If I jump back to the slides. The cash and the cash flow worksheet. So we've received quite a bit of feedback on this, which we also included. And the first one was on the cash flow worksheet. We had specific transactions. The ones that I can immediately think about was the foreign exchange, but sometimes gets handled between realized and unrealized difference between the different audit and accounting firms. And what we've decided to do for these transactions, or we have like intercompany loans, but they're not really they're not seen as loans, they're seen as trade receivables, and then it makes it hard to accommodate those. We have done the one column in your cash flow worksheet to be a complete input column so that you can use that for any adjustments that you need to make. And then we also have increased your other lines. So you used to have 1 to 3, now you have 5 lines everywhere. So that's now in your cash flow worksheet and in your cash flow notes if you want to include that. The other area is we had some questions about it didn't print correctly. If you wanted to print it out, that it actually didn't show or didn't print a certain area. So we fixed that. And then if you select your income statement by nature, it duplicated your cost of sales in your cash flow worksheet. And we also corrected that. So I just quickly want to show you the input column. So what we've done on the input column is this other non-cash profit and loss column. We've made the whole column input. So like I say, now if you have any transactions that you want to take in and out, you can do it there and easily visible. And this other non-cash items here used to go 1 to 3. So now it goes 1 to 5. And like I say, that is the same in your note as well. So that is quite a big change that we've done there, like I say, from client feedback that we have received. Then the next is the PI score calculation. So in the previous year, what we've done is we have adjusted the PI score to be before journals, because that was the PI score document was originally intended for, to determine your type of engagement, and for that you wanted the pre-engagement figures. However, for XBRL, you need your post-adjustment figures, where you also need your PI score. So what we did last year is we've just uploaded your PI score calc in your mandatory page to have that in there. But now we also got clients that ask us for their engagement, they actually do want to see the pre and the post adjustment figures. So we just went to your PI score calc, and you'll now see that you have the pre and the post all on your PI score calc that you can use. The pre one you'd normally use, like we say, to determine your engagement type. The post is more for your XBRL, but we did hear some of the clients also want to use their post for engagement type, so that's now all on the same document. While I am mentioning the PI score calc, I also just want to mention as well XBRL. So the XBRL taxonomy that was released by SIPC, they normally take the taxonomy that's issued by the standards board, and they add their portion that they want that's mandated for South Africa, and then it gets released here. But what the standard board does when a new standard is effective, they don't look at the effective date, they look at the issue date. So the taxonomy actually already includes IFRS 18 and IFRS 19 and the new SME standard, and the old standards have been deprecated. Now, because of the content in our templates has not been updated with that, and our clients are not using that currently, that caused a misalignment between the taxonomy and what is effective currently in the market. So for that reason, we will not adopt a new taxonomy this year and next year. And this is something that we are working closely with SIPC with, and they are aware with. But we will make sure that the validation and all of that will still be successful. Since SIPC and XBRL has been implemented, there is a grace period for how long the taxonomy is adopted, and normally it's about 3 to 5 years. But because of the realization that there's quite a delay of when it's effective to what your registration date is, to where your year-end date is, that you might be actually about 18 months behind just the nature of your cycle and then your registration date. So in any event, there's always a kind of a grace period of taxonomies that are allowed that are older. We will just make sure that, like I say, the validation and the mandatory page with the update on 1 October still will give you successful submissions, but there won't be any changes in the template for the taxonomy. We do have 1 or 2 mandatory fields that we are going to look at, just because we get quite a few questions on those to see if we can just make it a bit easier for the users, but again, nothing from a taxonomy side. Then for IFRS specifically, we have effective of IAS 21, which is the new notes, which is after financial instruments and risk management. So the IAS 21 is specifically addressing the issue of lack of exchangeability that were issued with the ISAB in August 2023, and it will become effective for years beginning 1 Jan 2025. So that's now the new year. So the amendment provides guidance on how to determine the spot exchange rate, what currencies are not exchangeable, which is particularly relevant for entities operating in economies subject to hyperinflation. So it's not the only reason, but that will definitely be where it is implemented the most, so some of our African countries. And while IAS 29 address how to restate financial statements in hyperinflation, IAS 21 addresses how to translate those. So it's more about the calculation than actually disclosure. So I'm quickly going to show you just how that note looks, so that you can also just see it. So like I say, it is just after your risk management note. So quite at the back of the financials, you now have your lack of exchangeability and where you can, some guidance on how you should apply it, and then also some calculations and some more disclosure that you can have here at the bottom. So like I say, that is only for IFRS, as it is a IFRS RS 21 standard. Then some other areas that we have also worked on, and most of these are from market feedback. Firstly, in the preparer, you now have the option that these financial statements were internally prepared under the supervision of. So it's a new option that seems to be used quite widely in the market. So we've added that as one of your options. Then your index and your detailed income statement, when you had a reviewed set of financials not audited, then it didn't have a footnote to say that it was not reviewed, although you normally don't review it as well. So you now have that in your index, in your detailed income statement, you have that as a footer if you select review in your information store. Then we have two new ICPs, which is an SME only. The one is your members' contribution if you select a CC in your information store, and cash and cash equivalent. It also seems to be used quite widely in the market, so we've decided to put that in also as a default. And then, like I mentioned, the audit report is updated for SOPS 3. For the beta, only the audit report has been updated, but for the final, all the assurance reports will be updated as well. And then there is here and there some additional bug fixes that we've done, also from market feedback, very small changes. You are welcome to read them in the release notes. The link that we will send with recording will have a link to the release notes and the download page and all of that. So you can look there to that as well. I'm just quickly going to jump into the file just to show you those changes quickly. So firstly, these financials were prepared by, and then you used to have these financial statements were supervised by, and now we had the third option here. These financial statements were internally prepared under the supervision of, for mostly our corporates that will use that. And then on your index, like I say, you have the option of it's unaudited. Now you also have the option here that it's not reviewed. This will switch on automatically if you make the selection of the reviewers report in your information store. And then if I go to my accounting policies, I'm just going to scroll down here. There's your two new accounting policies that is there, the cash equivalent, and then also the members contribution for if you select a CC. You're welcome to give me feedback on these and any other items that I've shown if you feel that they should be different or that you use it differently, and we can take that into consideration. I'm quickly going to have a look and see if there is a question. The first one is Douglas that's asking, regarding the cash flow statement in the financial statements, the prior column is an input column when drafting. Could you please advise why this is input cells? So when we have introduced the cash flow worksheet, the feedback that we got was your prior year is already signed off. So you don't want to go through the whole process of calculating your cash flow again for your prior year because it's signed off and you have your PDF with that in. So the first year that we introduced it, our expectation would be that you capture that from your signed financials rather than recalculating it and then not having the same result, and you wouldn't want to change your signed financials. That's why there's not another calculation for your prior year. And then after your first year that you've done it, if you do a roll forward, those input fields will retain. So your current year should move to your prior year, although they are still input. So that is the reason why we haven't invested the time in doing the cash flow worksheet. It is quite a big development effort, and the feedback that we got when we introduced this to the market is the prior year most likely will always be captured from your signed financials. I hope that answers your question, Douglas. And then a question from Gino about the IFRS 17 template that we have available from consulting. will IAS 21 be part of the IFRS 17? So yes, you know how it works is your base IFRS template will include the IAS 21, and then your IFRS 17 is on top of that. So it will definitely also include the change that was included there. Okay, I just want to double check. So I've got a question here for somebody that Samantha, that definitely is more a tax expert. She's asking if the donation that you add back as a permanent difference and why there's no space after the taxable income for us to take 10% of the taxable income and then a new taxable income calculator, which is then used to calculate the tax for the year. So Samantha, I'll definitely take this one offline, have a look at it and come back to you if we can include that. Or if expectation would be that you'll have it as part of your permanent differences, you'll have the total amount and then you add back amounts in 2 rows. So let me just have a look at that and then I will come back to you with that one offline. Then there's a question on IFRS 18 for probe, but I'll maybe have a general answer for IFRS 18 and IFRS 19. So when we do our webinar, our What's New webinar, we'll definitely include the roadmap for next year as well. But the IFRS 18 and IFRS 19 will not be early adopted in our desktop products. We have found it quite difficult for our users in the past. If we do early adopt it, we did it with IFRS 16, and then because you have your old and your new mapping and your old disclosure and new disclosure, it really becomes very difficult for the broader part of the market to use it when we introduce it. So we do not make that available on desktop. We will, however, make the IFRS 18 and 19 available on cloud for people that would like to early adopt for specific clients if that becomes relevant. We have started to look at IFRS 18, and there will be quite an amount of, as you can imagine, mapping changes due to the difference in your income statement that you now have to split between investing, financing, and operating. So definitely will be quite a big change, but we will give more communication as soon as we have more on that. Okay, I'm going to try to answer. I'm going to take 5 minutes and answer as many of the questions as there is. It's quite a few. If I don't get to all of it, I will definitely communicate with you afterwards. Just want to see because some of the team is answering some of them. So just want to double check. So there was a question here from Johan about the cash flow worksheet for non-cash items differently than allowed and the design mode password for the cash flow worksheet. So the cash flow worksheet works quite differently. So even if I give you the design mode password, it actually doesn't look like a normal design mode. You won't be able to edit in a way that that will make it I want to say more usable. The only option that there is that you do have builder mode available. If you do have builder mode available, you can go and use that. But that's also why we've included a column that is completely input to help to assist with. So the design mode won't, I think, solve the problem for you, but hopefully with the input column that you now have, you can much easier in and out if you need to, if it's maybe not optimally working, or you can use builder mode. And that also helps us if we need to support you to make sure that, because if we start to go and change those formulas in design mode, it does become very hard to support and troubleshoot that as well. So I hope that answers your question, Johan. I see I've got a thumbs up, so it sounds like it does. So I've got a question here about, as a corporate, can you perhaps send us a list of notes that must be disclosed? we are not always 100% sure that we have included all the required notes. So that's quite an interesting question, because obviously that will be dependent per entity and per engagement. But what we see to a lot of the regulators actually, and I think in the latest IRBA report it is again in, that we shouldn't really have include everything just because there's a number. You should really look if it's quantitatively and qualitatively important to your engagement to have those numbers in there. So I want to say we always came from the school of thought that you have, if there's a number on your statement, you should have a note and you should have the accounting policy. But we are moving more away from that if we look at the regulators to say if it doesn't add value and it's not material, like I say, quantitatively or qualitatively, then perhaps you should not include that, because that actually provides, it just clutters the important information. So there's not an easy way for us to have a list of notes, because it really is so dependent on your entity. We are trying to work a bit more on that when we've recently launched our IFRS Cloud product. And in there, it's much easier to have a checklist and have visibility depending on how you answer your engagement. We can build it easier for you. But I think a part of that onus will always be on the professional that is preparing the financials to make sure that you have the right level of details for your stakeholders and then also what is regulated. I'm going to do one more question. And then any that I miss, I will definitely come back to you. Okay, so I think the others are very, very specific transactions if I look at it. And there's there's one or two questions about IFRS 17. So IFRS 17 is a template that gets maintained by our consulting team, just because it is so specific. So they so it provides you mapping, and we said it helps you to start the engagement, mapping and certain disclosure. But as IFRS 17 is implemented quite different in different industries, that it's very, we cannot necessarily templatize it 100%. So they will then assist you to do the rest of its implementation. So there is one or two questions about IFRS 17 specifically. For those, I'll reach out to you and I will set that up with the consulting team, because I think they will be better equipped to answer your questions.
For those who don't know me, my name is Sandini, and I'm going to talk you through what changes we've made in Probe for our beta release that is available for you to test. So there are 5 main areas that I'm going to be talking to you today about, of features and enhancements that we've made to Probe. The first is a Probe optimizer. Now this is different to the engagement optimizer that Mo would have talked you through earlier today. This one is specifically for Probe Audit. And then we also have a new feature or an enhancement for qualitatively material. This is allowing for you to actually mark certain financial statement areas as qualitatively material as well. Then, as some of you may know, there have been some Companies Act amendments. So we have made changes in Probe to accommodate for these amendments. And then we've also reviewed the IRBA inspection report for 2024, and we've made some additional procedures. We've added some additional procedures into Probe to cater for some of the findings that have been raised, specifically relating to IPE, or information produced by the entity, and the IT general controls. So I'm going to start off by talking you through the Probe optimizer. The overall objective of this is to increase the speed and efficiency throughout the file. We know that you guys struggle with speed quite a lot. And in addition to the Probe optimizer and the file optimizer, we're hoping that together this will actually create a lot of speed enhancements for you, including opening up documents, rolling forward files, and all of those background calculations. So the Probe optimizer uses the trial balance that you upload into your audit engagement file. Based on that trial balance, all of your financial statement areas will automatically be enabled or disabled. It will be enabled automatically if there's a current year or prior year balance on the trial balance. You then obviously have the option to mark anything or manually enable financial statement areas as well. And then once you have optimized, all of the work programs which relate to the disabled financial statement areas will then be blank. So this means that all of the content, the procedures, the data in those work programs will be removed to remove all of that data from your file and hopefully speed things up. It is also best practice for you to optimize every time a new trial balance is uploaded or a new section becomes enabled during your engagement, so that anything that was disabled previously can then be restored in your files. I'm going to show you what this looks like in Probe itself. So the optimizer is included in document 1051, which is your types and volumes of transactions. You will see there's a new optimize button at the bottom of the risk assessment procedure table. And this is the button that you can click to optimize your file and remove all of that data for your disabled sections. You'll also see that you still have the option to manually enable and manually enable sections that are disabled. So for example, the enabled sections will be in white as usual, and the disabled sections will be in blue. If I enable a new section, for example, in this case, goodwill, you will then see that there's a yellow bar warning that pops up at the top of the document to warn you that there has been changes, and then prompting you to re-optimize or click the optimize button again to restore all of that content and those procedures for the goodwill work program. The yellow bar warning for this beta release is only going to show in document 1051 if new sections have been enabled. For our final market release, this warning will show in all of your probe documents and will also pop up when a new trial balance has been uploaded into the file. So I also wanted to show you what the process of optimizing actually looks like. So once you've clicked the optimize button, there'll be a little pop-up to just ask that you close all of your work programs before running the optimizer. Once you've confirmed that all of your work programs have been closed, the optimizer will run. And once it's completed running, you will get another pop-up to warn you that it has completed. You'll then also see that there's a pathway that's provided to you for a detailed report on what the optimizer has actually deleted. So if I follow that pathway, then I will get to this report that is on the screen at the moment. So it is a probe optimizer TXT file that basically shows me all of the documents with the probe reference numbers, the document reference numbers, and the document descriptions that have been deleted with the date and the time that it has been deleted. So you do have a full audit trail of everything that the optimizer has removed. There's also a separate text file called Probe Purge Unused, which will actually show you all of the work programs that have been added back into the file from the optimizer as well. So in this case, you can see that my goodwill work program is there that I've optimized back. And this just shows me all of the documents that have been restored through the optimizer as well. So you will always have a full audit trail of everything that the optimizer has done for you. In your document manager, once you've run the optimizer, you will still see all of the work programs in your document manager. The only difference is this time you will see that there's in the title of the document, there's dash optimized, which means that that work program is now blank. And you can also see the icon of the document is a bit different. It's not a case view icon anymore. So all of the documents, all of the work programs will still remain in your document manager. It's just that this time, when you open that document, it will be completely blank. It will have no procedures, no content, and no data at all. You always have the option, though, to enable something and to restore it with the optimizer. And restoring it means that all of that content will be brought back into that work program. I also just want to stress that this is different to the engagement optimizer. How you will see the engagement optimizer that Mo has explained in your file is that there'll also be a dashed optimize next to the documents from the engagement optimizer. The main difference between that is that the engagement optimizer is optimized at your engagement level. So for example, in this case, because I've selected that my engagement type is an audit, all of my non-audit documents will be optimized out. So in this case, you can see the documents that are related to review engagements are optimized out, which means they will be blank in my audit file. All your engagement types will still be available to you in document 1020, even though you would have made a certain selection in your engagement optimizer. And I also want to stress that documents that are optimized by the file optimizer or by the engagement optimizer cannot be brought back with the optimize button in 1051. The optimize button in 1051 is only for probe audit work programs. Okay, and then moving on to our next enhancements that we've made for this beta release, we've added in a qualitatively material tick box, which I will show you in a second. The objective of this is to allow you to assess a COT ABD as qualitatively material. It's there so that you can now tailor your approach based on certain qualitative factors, and it also enhances your compliance with ISO 320. When you use the qualitatively material tick box, it will impact the risk of material misstatement calculation the same way as the quantitative material items do. And the material tick box will only appear for COT ABDs which are not already quantitatively material. So how this will look in your engagement file, in 1160, which is your risk assessment at assertion level, you will see all of your financial statement areas. And for those financial statement areas that are not material, for example, in this case, my investment property on cost model, you'll see I now have a question with a tick box that reads, is investment property on the cost model qualitatively material? So I now have the option to tick this tick box, even though the value of this COT ABD is below materiality. Ticking it means that I can now treat it the same as an item that's quantitatively material. For the financial statement area above it, you can see that for property, plant, and equipment, because this FSA is material already, I do not have the qualitatively material tick box as an option here. Also note that this will have an impact on your ROM calculation in the same way as something being quantitatively material. Okay, and then moving on to the Companies Act amendments. So as you know, this impacts only South African entities. There have been 2 amendments which have come into play. The first is Act 16, which is the first amendment, and the second is Act 17, which were both signed into law in the 26th of July, 2024. There were certain sections of the First Amendment and the full Second Amendment which came into effect on 27 December 2024. So what this means for probe is that relevant procedures have been updated to reflect these changes throughout your probe engagement file. And in the final release, in our market release in October, we will also be sharing with you a document which outlines where the amendments have been developed within probe so that you can easily refer to which amendments have been included in which aspects of probe and vice versa. And lastly, when it comes to the URBA inspection findings, we have reviewed the URBA inspection report, and this is something that we do every year. There's 2 reasons that we review the URBA inspection report. The first is to identify any sort of content corrections where we may have interpreted something a bit differently, or to make sure that our templates are fully compliant. And the second area is to identify any improvements that can make compliance with the standards easier and more effective. So after reviewing the URBA Inspection Report 2024, We haven't found any content corrections, but we have found two main areas where we can make compliance easier for all of you, and therefore make the template a bit more effective. So the first IRBA inspection finding relates to information produced by the entity, or IPE. The main finding was that audit documentation in general lacks the evidence of testing of the accuracy and completeness of those system-generated source information. So what we currently have in our market version and probe is that we do require users to document the completeness and the accuracy of the population where items were selected. And then that should be verified in accordance with ISO 500.9. But what we're doing to enhance this compliance is now we are asking users to document firstly whether IPE will be used for planning, for example, in your risk assessment, and for substantive procedures and tests of controls. And then secondly, where IPE is used, there'll be additional procedures appearing in planning and execution phases to then test the completeness and the accuracy of that IPE in line with ISO 500.9. So now all of that documentation and the evidence in your file will be easier to comply with ISO 500.9. The second IRBA inspection finding that we've made changes for is relating to IT general controls. So IRBA has raised some concerns over firms having inappropriate reliance on the application controls without actually testing the ITGCs. And they've also raised a concern over applying a control-based audit approach, again, without a proper ITGC foundation. So currently in our market version, users are required to do a few different things. Firstly, we do require you to obtain an understanding of the IT environment in 1055, where all of the ITGCs should be touched on. Then we also require that you determine any COT ABD related controls that are IT dependent or automated, and that's in 1150. Then we also currently require you to identify any IT related risks relating or arising from the IT applications, and then to identify those IT general controls for those related risks in 1150. And then if any reliance is placed on those controls, then we also require you to test IT general controls in 1910. So we have added a few more enhancements to reinforce compliance based on this IRBA inspection finding. Now we've added new conclusion questions to a few documents. The first is the audit plan and strategy in 1220. Then we've also added conclusion questions to the ITGC work program in 1910. And we've also added it to COT ABD work programs where tests of controls are planned. And these conclusion questions are there to prompt consideration of the appropriate reliance on ITGCs and application controls. When those prompts are responded to, we then prompt further action when concerns related to that reliance are identified. And this again is to enhance the documentation on your files, enhance that compliance, and then prevent any potential findings from IRBA. Okay, that is all that we've included. Those are the main 5 areas we've included in our probe beta install set for you to test as part of beta. There are some other smaller things that we've done, like bug fixes that we've got from feedback from you, and some other minor enhancements, which will all be included in the release notes as part of the email that you'll receive on Monday if you do test, that you can also refer to and test that as well. I just want to walk you through the beta process in case some of you missed Mo's session earlier this morning. So as of Monday, the 1st of September, you will receive an email with links that will include all of the install sets for all of the products that we've showcased today. It'll also include the release notes for each of the products, so for Caseware Working Papers, the financials, and for Probe. And you'll also receive a feedback form that you can complete as you're performing your beta testing. The testing period will run from the 1st of September to the 12th of September. So that's a full 2 weeks that you'll have available to test. During this period, you can test, you can fill in the feedback form as many times as you need as you're testing. If anything critical does come up, please let us know. You're welcome to email us with queries, and you can also book time with us to discuss any of that critical feedback. Then the 12th of September, which is a Friday, is the deadline for all of that feedback if you would like that feedback to be considered for our final release in October. Then we will have our What's New webinar on Friday, the 10th of October, and this is for our market release. And that sums up the beta process.